Welcome back. People around the world, certainly in the US, are coming to grips with the undeniable fact that Donald Trump is now President-elect of the United States after his decisive election triumph in the United States. We do a deep dive on what this election victory means for America's identity and its shift to conservative politics. I'm joined by Elizabeth Larris, Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, and Dr. Seher Khan, a Senior Fellow and Deputy Director of the South Asia Program at the Stimson Center. Elizabeth Larris, let me come to you first. Does the US election result show that there is perhaps a growing distrust of political elites in America? Would you agree that Trump's outsider status and his narrative of draining the swamp, if you will, or changing Washington from within seem to have appealed to voters frustrated with a status quo in American politics?
Absolutely. A lot of American voters are very jaded, disenchanted with American political institutions, as well as with the American media. A lot of voters believe that the American media, holds water, particularly for the Democratic Party and for the political elites. More so, though, this election was about the economy. And the economy is definitely hurting middle class and lower middle class, blue collar, working Americans. And those are the ones who have become jaded with Washington politics because they feel that Washington is not looking out for their best interests. That inside the Beltway, it's a very insular group. It's a very insular community. And that people in Washington, the politicians, and particularly in Congress and in the executive branch, just weren't getting where the American people are. And Trump resonated with that. Trump resonated as someone who is an outsider and who can come in, even though he had already been president, right, which is pretty ironic, but that he could come in and say, I understand, this just isn't working. We can't have more of the same in the next 4 years. So he agreed with, obviously, most Americans, because he not only won the Electoral College, but he also won the popular vote.
Okay, fair enough. Dr. Seher Khan, how did Trump's his style, his brash style, his controversial style, his direct style of communication work to attract voters? Was this a part of a pushback against a sense of elitism which has come to be attached with the Democrats in America?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me on your show. And yes, to some extent, I think it is a response to the elitism, but I think it's a little more than that. One of the things that has been President Trump's strengths is his ability to simplify. And so the way that he talks to voters about really complicated issues, even when you think about ending the wars or fixing the economy, he'll make it seem as if he'll come in and swoop something up and everything will be fine. And for most people, that sounds like somebody who's in charge, right? They don't want to know the details and they don't want to be told that things are too complicated for them to understand. Instead, they want somebody who will come and sweep in and fix it. And I think what was really the weakness this time around with the Democrats was that the economy is actually doing well. The US GDP has grown, but of course there's inflation, which is a natural output of a growing GDP. But the Democrats did a really bad job of explaining that and explaining why there's inflation and what potentially Kamala Harris would do to combat that. Whereas Trump, if you look really carefully at his campaign promises, he never once explains the how. He never once goes into details of how he's going to fix the economy and how he's going to end the wars and how he's going to do all these things. The only two things he really focused on was immigration and to basically say that the economy was broken. So I think his strength really falls into simplifying things in a way that appeal to the broader public, but he doesn't really go into details about how he'll do that.
Elizabeth Larris, where does this leave America's Democrats?
Well, it leaves them wondering, what went wrong, what happened. Again, political parties tend to be so insular. And now they really have to do some, introspection and find out, how did they lose so much of the Latino vote? 45% of the Latino vote went for Trump. Yes. How did they lose so much of the young men's vote? how is it that so many young Black American men voted for Trump in numbers that they had not in 2016 and in 2020? Harris even lost some of the women's vote. Biden got more of the women's vote than Harris did. So they really need to look at the direction of the US society. It's not just the economy, of course, that's crucially important, but also society. There definitely is a bit of a centrist right tilt to American society. I'm sure you've heard about wokeness.
Yes.
And people do not want to vote for the party that would lecture to them on their weaknesses and lecture to them on how you're a bad citizen because you might be homophobic or racist or something. That's not going to draw a lot of people to your party other than the true believers. So they need to really look at American society as well as the economy as factors in the political process.
Sarah, would you like to come in on this demographic shift in America away from, people who've traditionally leaned towards the Democrats becoming Republican? I mean, Trump has gained supporters among young voters, Black voters, Latino men, as Elizabeth pointed out. How, in a sense, is this a new America, a very new America?
And that's a great question. And I do agree with Elizabeth as well in terms of looking at society. But, generally, and a lot of studies have been done on this, that immigrant communities tend, especially first generation, tend to be more conservative socially and economically because they've moved to a new country and they're trying to adjust. And you'll see perhaps changes or move perhaps more from center to left in second or third generations. And so the fact that their Latino voters, especially men, voted more heavily they came out for the Republican Party. It's not that much of a surprising trend. I think what's unique about the US election is not that folks move more towards the Republican Party, but that they moved more towards Trump. And President Trump he's a unique candidate. The US has never really had a candidate who has been convicted, who has been charged with sexual assault, who has been somebody who openly makes fun of folks with disabilities and mental health issues. And I think that's kind of been the new part of it and I'm not sure this is a counterfactual, to be honest, but I really think that Kamala Harris lost partly because President Trump was the candidate. I feel that she may have perhaps won or had a chance of winning if the Republican candidate had been somebody else. There is something about Trump that appeals to folks, and I think this will be a study for a lot of people going forward. Perhaps a lot of dissertations will be written on the political psychology of it. But my sense is that it's really his factor. He has been able to evoke a kind of populism and nationalism amongst rural Americans and amongst those who are, really suffering economically,
right.
Where they don't really care that much about some of the bigoted things that he says, and they care more about how he's going to fix things, even though he doesn't explain how he'll do that.
So that brings me to my final question, Elizabeth, and you can turn around and probably say, but look, who cares? America has just voted, but I'll ask you nonetheless. Is there a danger of Trump becoming president, a man with criminal cases, a man who refused to exit the White House, deeply abusive at one level, pro-abortion? Where does that leave America?
Well, it leaves America very much, where it was before the election. Americans will go on with their jobs. American political institutions are still strong. Remember, the president is only one political actor. There is Congress. Now, the Senate did flip to Republican. We're still waiting to see if the Republicans will hold on to the House. Now, if Republicans take, the Senate as well as the House, then you have a clean sweep.
And the Supreme Court, which the Republicans, as I understand it, already have. So the Supreme Court, possibly, the Supreme Court, the Senate, and possibly the House, or likely the House, and it is and the White House, and it is a complete sweep.
Yeah, there's just still a bunch of races, undecided, very close races in the House. But Also this time around, for the first time, I believe, since Reconstruction, there are more Americans are registered and identified as Republican than Democrats. So we are looking at some real party realignments. And so where Trump takes this, I mean, he won by a larger electoral college margin than anyone since 1988. So he can say he has a mandate, but the Democrats aren't dead, right? And so they're going to, their role now is to be in the opposition and to limit what the Republicans and President Trump can do. And so we'll have to see how strong their leadership is in Congress and in imposing as a really a formidable opposition.
All right, well, I'd like to thank both of you very much for being with us.